Music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Machine Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Pun Show. Gonna try and work through today. Got some long COVID issues that my stomach's not doing well, but we'll see what we can do. Excuse me. Hope you can struggle with me. Today, I want to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about the Trump tariff bailout for the farmers and point out some things about that maybe it's not quite what you think it might be. I also want to talk about the comparison that people have been making. I hear a lot of people saying, well, oh, you're okay with Obama's drone strikes, but now you're not okay with the boat strikes in the Caribbean, as though they're the same thing. So I'm going to talk about drone strikes in general and how equating that with the boat strikes in the Caribbean is a false equivalence. Then I'm going to dive mostly into and continue what I started yesterday, looking at Latin America and how U.S. intervention there has caused a lot of the political instability that is creating the mass migration problem that we have now. So, let's just go ahead and get going here. I'll start off with the drones thing. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So I'm going to be on a different screen here. I'll come back to look at comments from time to time to make sure that I'm not missing anything. But feel free to, like yell at me or whatever. Here's the thing. The drone strikes are very different from the Caribbean boat strikes on a number of different grounds. But first, I just want to talk about like drone strikes in general. What was Bush's basis for it? What was Obama's basis for it? And a lot of people don't seem to realize that Trump ordered a lot of drone strikes in his first term too. And so we're going to look through all of that and look at how just even the exercise of drone strikes changed over time. Also want to point out, like I see people saying, oh, well, Obama ordered more drone strikes than everybody else in history. And it's like, well, of course he did. Obviously, he ordered more drone strikes than like Abraham Lincoln. We didn't have drones before Bush. And even then, they didn't like really evolve to the point where they could be used the way Obama used them until Obama. So we're going to talk about all that. It's going to spend about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes on this topic. First, just some things to consider. It's like when you talk about drone strikes, one thing you have to keep in mind is the alternatives aren't drone strikes or no drone strikes. The alternatives are drone strikes or do nothing or boots on the ground. Okay. So Bush did not have as many drone strikes, but he did have 2 land invasions, which cost anywhere from 100 to 300 times as many civilian deaths. So, like, let's not just say, "Oh, drone strikes bad," right? Sometimes drone strikes, the alternative is not always just do nothing. So, uh, just some of the quick numbers: 100 to 300 times as many people killed from Bush's ground wars to Obama's drones. There were 0 congressional votes on the ISIS authorization. We're going to talk about that. I think that's one of the key things here. And maybe, like a fair criticism of Obama to a certain point. And then 3 times Donald Trump in his first term, at least for the first 2 years, tripled the rate that Obama was using drone strikes for. So it's like, you can't blame Obama for drone strikes and then excuse Trump for them. And then Trump, for his last 2 years, basically just stopped sharing any information at all on how many drone strikes we were doing. So we'll get into all that. So here's like the comparison of drone strikes by president. George Bush used about 48 to 57. There were minimal civilian deaths because there was minimal drone strikes, but there were 100,000 plus ground war deaths. And that number can get a lot higher if you start looking at peripheral deaths caused by displacement and disease and starvation and things like that. Barack Obama endorsed like 500 to 563 drone strikes. He caused 324 to 807 civilian deaths. There's some murkiness about how the reporting was done. That's a fair criticism because he counted anyone that was a fighting age male as a combatant, which not necessarily all fighting age males were combatants. He had a drone strike every 5.4 days. And he actually did request authorization from Congress, and Congress didn't give it to him. And we'll talk about why in a bit and like why that matters too. Donald Trump authorized 238 drone strikes, so nearly half as many as Obama did in 8 years. He did it in the first couple of years. And his strike rate was every 1.4 days. And then he just stopped reporting how many he was doing in 2019. So we don't know how many drone strikes there were in his last 2 years. In terms of fatalities, Bush, there were like 100,000 to 200,000 or more just in Iraq alone from the ground invasion. Obama, just from the drone strikes, around 324 to 807. Like I said, that depends on how you count civilian deaths. But on the high side, 807 over 8 years. Trump, we had 450 over the first 2 years. And that's not knowing what happened after that because, again, he stopped reporting it. So the number of fatalities through the war, the ground war, 100 to 2,000, 100,000 for Bush, 286 to 436 for Bush, just through drone strikes. Through Obama, 324 to 870 or 807. Through Trump, it was like 450 plus. And after that, we don't know. After 2019, we don't know. So my point is, like all the Trump apologists, they want to make it about like Obama did these drone strikes, and they never like seem to recognize Trump was just as bad, if not worse, when it comes to drone strikes, especially when you consider the timeline and that he was doing it at like more than 3 times the rate as Obama. And we'll get into it a bit. He also expanded the areas. But let's go into the history of the justification for drone strikes, because I think this is actually pretty interesting. In 2001, Congress passed the authorization for utilization of military forces, and they said anyone who planned, authorized, committed, or aided in the 9/11 attacks, we had authorization to use for military force. And we're supposed to have congressional approval to use military force in the Constitution. Like, the Constitution literally says that Congress has the right to declare war. The president can't do that unilaterally. Okay. But then what happened is ISIS happened. And Obama expanded the reasoning of sorry, I've got the hiccups. Expanded the 2001 reasoning. ISIS didn't even exist in 2021. They were actively fighting the Al Qaeda, but he said it was included in the initial authorization. So what he did is he actually tried to get it authorized, and Congress refused to vote on it. And they basically didn't want to vote on it because they didn't want to give him approval, because it would actually limit how much authority he had versus using 2001 authorization. And they didn't want to vote for him to have it because they'd prefer to criticize him for it. So the Republican Congress also didn't want to like vote against ISIS, or vote against him in favor of ISIS. Like, they didn't want to say, oh, we're protecting ISIS, or be made to seem like that. So it's just better to not have a vote at all. So Congress never voted yes or no. He requested authorization and he never received it, but he received funding for it. And so it's like he stretched the meaning of the 2001 authorization to, I can't remember the language, but like, and their buddies is basically what it means, even though they weren't associated forces, I think. And ISIS was not associated forces. Everybody just pretended it was okay, including the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress, including Obama. And because it's like nobody wanted to just like be on ISIS side. The thing about all of that is ISIS was clearly terrorists. Like, nobody was saying ISIS were innocent fishermen or something. They were chopping off people's heads and streaming it on the internet. That's just a fact, right? So while you can argue that the Obama stretched his executive authority by doing that, nobody's going to say he was like not on moral ground fighting ISIS. And in fact, if he had not done anything, and then ISIS had carried out some kind of a terrorist attack on the United States, then he would have been clobbered by the Republicans for that sort of thing. So then Trump came into office, and he decentralized strike authority, at least under Obama. Like, he had to approve it, or, like the White House had to approve it anyway, like had to go through the White House, whether it was him personally or not. I think some of the lower level guys he didn't personally authorize, but it was still like a White House approval thing. It wasn't just left to the military. Well, Trump said, "No, just don't bother me with details. Just kill whoever you want." So he eliminated the Obama era process, and military and CI can now authorize strikes without White House approval. March 2019, Trump revoked all the transparency requirements. Like Obama had, because some of the strikes had taken out civilians and even American civilians, he turned up the notification and like he took measures to improve that area, like more transparency and more caution in terms of who you strike and where. Then Trump took away all those steps that Obama had taken. And we still don't know exactly what happened with the second half of his presidency there. So then in 2025, in February, they'd stretch things even further to, like they're saying, okay, well, Obama said if you're a terrorist, then 2001 applies. And so now we're going to just designate these cartels as narco-terrorists and say 2001 applies. Which even like Obama's stretch was probably unconstitutional. This is definitely unconstitutional because at least you could argue ISIS evolved from Al-Qaeda. And so it's associated forces in that way. There's nothing there's no line to draw from the Al-Qaeda to the drug cartels in South America. And this also goes into the whole thing that there's absolutely no reason to declare them as narco-terrorists. But anyway, that's what they did. So let's like the technology. Let's just go to we'll skip over this whole section. But each administration, so the minimal Bush was fully authorized by Congress to carry out his. Obama increased the drone attacks. He tried to get congressional approval and they just didn't vote on it. Trump continued the same thing, tripled it, eliminated all the transparency, removed the approval process, and Congress never said anything. Now he's manipulated the foreign terrorist organization definitions and used that to implement the Caribbean boat strikes. So these are not at all the same things. Like the cartels are not like ISIS at all. Cartels are not chopping people's heads off. And they have no political motivations or anything. This is just taking something that had already been stretched to breaking and stretching it even more, and it's just broken now. So you can say, well, were you okay with Obama? I'd say I wasn't necessarily okay with Obama doing what he did. I also wouldn't be okay. Like the main thing with Obama, I'm not okay with Congress not acting, in all honesty. It's not like ISIS was not a threat. If anybody wants to argue with me that ISIS wasn't a threat, go ahead. But they were chopping people's heads off. They were beheading people literally and streaming it. So it's not like you can just say, "Oh well, they weren't terrorists." They were terrorists. And we had to do something. Congress should have just authorized given Obama the authorization that he asked for. But if you want to argue Obama shouldn't have acted without that authorization, I'm not going to argue with you on that. That's a valid point. I don't know what you would think the solution would be, but there we go. All right, so that pretty much covers that section. In the YouTube link, I've got a dashboard link there if you want to go and look at the other details and the links to verify what I'm saying. Okay. So now let's go into what I'm calling the Great Farm Heist. This is the next section. And this is, you may have heard that Trump is giving this $12 billion bailout to the farms. And you might think that's great for small farmers. But most of this money is going to the large corporate farms. And I don't think people realize how much damage our small private farms are experiencing right now. We could have the most farms declare bankruptcy in a single year than we've had since 1986. Like it's that bad, because you've got this cumulative effect of the tariffs plus the mass deportations. And then this bailout is mostly helping the corporate farms, not the small private farms. And I'll walk you through this and explain why. So the bailout total is $12 billion. The number of bankruptcies is going to be over 1,000, which is a 70% increase from last year. Part of that is because they've lost 6.5% of their ag workers. And some of those are undocumented, but some of those are just legal immigrants or people that are here legally that don't want to go to work because they don't want to get arrested for being brown and working on a farm. When, with the basically approval to racially profile is happening. And we're going to talk more about this maybe tomorrow or Friday, but how NAFTA actually did a lot to create this issue with agricultural workers. So I don't think that I'm just blaming Republicans for things. The NAFTA created a crisis that's not about like manufacturing cars. It's not just about this giant sucking sound. But there's a bigger crisis that it created with the farms and shutting down the farms in Mexico. And that's why you have so many workers now coming up here. And then $7,000 to legally bring over an H-2A worker. It's about $7,000 per worker per season for the farmer. And so it's like people are like, well, why don't they just hire legal workers? Why don't they just do it legally? Because they can't afford to. And it literally chews up all of the profit that they would make. Okay. So where is this money, this $12 billion going? 10% or 20% of it is going to the top 1% of farmers. 60% of it is going to the next 9%. Another like 15% is going to the next 10%, right? And then the bottom 80% of farmers is getting about 20% of the bailout money. So this is like out of the 500,000 farmers or whatever, they're getting like 80% of the money. So why is that? There's a couple of reasons. One is that the bailout is based on how much acreage you have, right? So you get bailed out by so many dollars per acre, and it's only for like what they call row crops. So, like strawberry crops, if you're a strawberry farmer, you're not eligible at all. This is only for row crops, like things like soybeans and corn. That can be like largely automated. The ones that require a lot of hand labor don't get bailed out. It's the ones that require manual labor don't get bailed out. The ones that get that have auto labor that the corporations do are getting bailed out. That's number two. Number three is in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they kind of changed the language of it so that if you have, it used to be like that the ownership of the farm would get limited to like one person, right? So if you had multiple owners, you only got the same amount of money as if you only had one owner. Well, now what they did in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, through LLCs and things like that, each person that has ownership in the farm can individually be bailed out. So you've got these farms where, you've got multiple people that are being reimbursed by the government versus the small family farms where they can't do that. So the average small farmer is only getting about $46.77, and they have a payment cap of $155,000. The large corporate farms, they're getting an average payment of $524,000, and basically they can get as much money as they need. There's not the cap that was supposed to be there is basically rendered pointless by this new language in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Overall, the trade war losses in the whole tariff thing, it's going to cost us $44 billion in net cash, or it cost the farmers $44 billion in net cash. Corn prices are down 50%, soybeans down 40% since 2022. There's another thing that's the actual crops have been really good. And so now you've got more corn and more soybean, for instance, and less people to sell it to because they can't export it because of the Trump's little trade war. Then you've got, for the people that are not eligible for the bailouts, they're also losing out their labor, and they can't afford the H-2A cost barrier. And this to me is where we should be looking at things logically. Like, I always hear Republicans saying things like, "Oh, well, you just want to who's going to pick our cotton or whatever." And it's like, that's dumb. Like, the people that were arguing against who's going to pick our cotton, by the way, are the ones that were saying we should send the slaves back to Africa. So, like, maybe do your research on that little quote that you're misattributing there. But no, I don't think that who's going to pick our cotton. I think who's going to pick our strawberries is a very valid statement. And I think in order to answer, like, we need to reform our immigration system so that the people who are picking our strawberries really not feeling that well today. So the people that are picking our strawberries could be able to, like, pick them, if you follow me, and be paid reasonably. I don't think that the question is whether or not they should be there. It's how can we have them there where they're able to work for a fair wage and also not depress American wages. But we obviously need them. because Americans aren't filling those jobs. The businesses are going under because they can't find people to fill them. But the H-2A visas, because when you hire somebody on that visa, you have to pay for, first of all, like advertising to um, make sure that Americans can't fill the job. Then you have to pay for advertising to get people to get the jobs. Then you have to pay for their transportation to come over here. You have to pay for you have to pay for the actual visa. You have to pay for their food and their lodging while they're here. So all of that together, it ends up costing about $7,000 per worker per season for the farmer. So if they need 10 workers to do their farm and they're making $50,000 a year and it costs $7,000 per worker to, that's more than what it would cost to just hire an undocumented worker. It costs them $7,000 more to go through the legal process. Well, that means that their farm is now losing $20,000 and nobody can keep up with that, right? So what we need to do is change our immigration policy, not just like bankrupt our farmers. So this just becomes another aspect of wealth transfer. And because of all of this, a number of farms, about 1,000 farms this year, are going to declare bankruptcy. And meanwhile, the corporate farms are going to continue to make more money. This is kind of a historical pattern that we've seen through previous bailouts, where the corporate bailouts helped the large corporate farms more than the small farms, and definitely like the specialty crops are just destroyed by it. And this has been a historical pattern, and now the One Big Beautiful Bill Act makes it all even worse. So just wanted to point that out. Like, if you hear this news about the $12 billion that Trump is providing for the for the farmers, that most of that is just going to his rich buddies, and it's designed that way, and it's made even worse by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is definitely not beautiful. All right, so now let's go to the main story today. Which I spoke about this quite a bit yesterday, and I want to continue on this path today, and that is how we talk about, continuing on the immigration crisis. Why do we have an immigration crisis? And as I mentioned yesterday, there's kind of a push versus pull when you're talking about immigration. There's, on the one side of it, why do people want to come here? American dream and so on. But why do they want to leave where they are? And we have had 120 years of American policy that has generated so much political and social turmoil in South America that we are responsible for them emigrating with an E, which is why they're immigrating with an I over here. Why are they leaving Guatemala and everything? But why don't they have all of that? They don't really actually get to stay here for free. They don't get free healthcare. They don't get free food. None of that is true. But why can't they have a living where they're at? Like, you're talking about why they're coming here, but why are they leaving there? Why are they walking across half a continent to get here? Why are they risking their lives and their children's lives? Yeah, see, this is just irresponsible rhetoric. So if you could just hang on to your little snide comments, then that would be swell. I'm going to actually talk about reality here, and you're welcome to chime in on reality, but just the Elon Musk really screamy talking points aren't doing any good here. Okay, so uh let's talk about what happened. Yesterday I was talking about the Panama Canal and how we literally just carved out the nation of Panama so that we could have a Panama Canal and benefit American banks and American corporations. And then we like literally red wedding the dude named Sandino in Nicaragua so that there wouldn't be a Nicaragua canal. And after that, they had fought for their freedom, and we just cooed that country up and had him killed and so on and so forth. And this is where we are. That's why Colombia and Nicaragua and Panama are a mess. Now let's talk about Guatemala, and we're going to talk about the Cold War and the policies that happened there. And we're going to focus more on the United Fruit Company in Guatemala. So let's go with the Empire Strikes South today. First, we're going to talk about the Cold Wars. Okay. From the 50s through the 80s, under the banner of fighting communism, the U.S. orchestrated coups, funded death squads, and blocked brutal dictatorships. Hundreds of thousands were killed. Democracies were destroyed. The countries people are fleeing today are still living with the consequences. The first country mentioning, I'm going to go into more detail on this, is Guatemala, where the CIA operation PB Success overthrew democratically elected President Jacobo Arbenz. His crime? Land reform that threatened United Fruit Company's unused land. The coup installed military dictatorship, triggering 36-year civil war with genocide of Mayan populations. And Guatemala is a top source of asylum seekers today. The violence, poverty, and institutional collapse people flee trace directly to the coup we orchestrated to protect a fruit company. By the way, the people that did the orchestrating owned part of the fruit company. So we'll get into all that. In 1973 in Chile, the CIA backed Pinochet against democratically elected Salvador Allende. Pinochet's dictatorship, 17 years, thousands disappeared, murdered, torture. Kissinger said on this, Henry Kissinger, I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its people. So he was like, oh, well, they're going to go communist. And then he was using this to back this evil dictator that was like literally just killing people and stuff. And a big part of our whole presence in South America has been we're preventing communism, but what we're actually preventing is democracy. We weren't allowing people to vote and determine their own leadership and to determine their own autonomy. And what they were fighting for was usually not even communism. Oh, whoops. I don't have this up here. So yeah, we've got like just regular comments about, we've got people saying that I don't want to hear like you have no reality. You never explain Harris policy. I don't know why you're always talking about Harris policy, Todd. This conversation is not about Harris policy. And I'm not sticking up for drug cartel terrorists. So you don't want to hear any. No, I just don't want to propagate propaganda. It's always weak beta. Yeah, see, so anyway. Todd is not very bright. Okay, so El Salvador, we backed a right-wing government with $6 billion in military aid. Death squads killed 75,000 people, including Archbishop Romero, was assassinated while giving mass. U.S. trained forces committed El uh, Mazoto massacre, 1,000 civilians murdered, including children. War refugees fled to LA. This is interesting. Did you know that MS-13 as a gang was actually started by refugees that came here and then were treated so badly that they ended up just forming their own gang, and then they got deported. And so MS-13 is a U.S. export, by the way. I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. This is all something that we started. We created the refugees, then we turned them into gang members, then we exported them, then we're like sitting there blaming the other country for them. It's just like a circle. In Nicaragua, Reagan funded the Contra rebels despite congressional ban. And we're going to go into that tomorrow. Iran Contra scandal, CIA facilitated cocaine trafficking to fund Contras. Gary Webb's Dark Alliance exposed it. 30,000 killed. Infrastructure was destroyed. So the pattern repeated in Honduras, Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina. If you've ever read a book called The Mothers That Disappeared, like they were just nabbing people off the street, and this was a U.S. endorsed government doing it. We always make it look like the people that we were endorsing were the, democratically elected people trying to stave off the communists. But the people they were staving off were democratically elected, and they weren't communists. They were just not fighting for U.S. corporate interests. So, all right. The cost of anti-communism, the official story. We were fighting Soviet influence and protecting freedom. The reality, we overthrew democracies to install dictatorships. We funded death squads that murdered hundreds of thousands. We destroyed institutions that countries needed to develop. Like, we undermined them so much and made it so impossible for their government structure to exist. And then we're like, they're so bad. Well, they're so bad because we spent 120 years destroying them. And you can say, well, that was 50 years ago, but it's been going on for 120 years. And so you can't take what is happening now and separate it from history and everything that's gone on before. That's just not the way that the world works or ever has worked. Every military officer who ran a death squad we trained, every massacre we funded, every democracy destroyed, we orchestrated it. Sorry. And now, when people flee the violence, poverty, and instability we created, we call them criminals for seeking asylum. Hang on one second. Sorry. I think I'm gonna have to end this here. Like I said, the long COVID is not doing well today. So, excuse me. Stomach's upset right now.